الله من الشيطان الرجيم. استغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام، وأتوب إليه من جميع ظلمي وجرمي وإسرافي على نفسي، وأتوب إليه. يا دائم الفضل على البرية، يا باسط اليدين بالعطية، يا صاحب المواهب الصنية، صل على محمد وآله خير الورى سجية، واغفر لنا يا ذا العلا في هذه العشية. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء، وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء، وخضع لها كل شيء، وذل لها كل شيء، وبجبروتك التي قلبت بها كل شيء، وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء، وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء، وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء، وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء، وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء، وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء، وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهدك الإثم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل اللقاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك، واستشفع بك إلى نفسي، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك، وأن توزعني شكرك، وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع، أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا، وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته، وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم أظم سلطانه وعلى مكانه، وخفي مكروه وظهر أمره، وغلب قهره وجرى قدرته ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومته. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائه ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي الغبي بالحسن مبدلا غيره. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من غبيه سترته وكم من فاده من البلاء أغلته وكم من إثار وغيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم أضم بلائي وأفرت بي سوء حالي وغثرت بي أعمالي وغعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي يا سيدي وأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملت في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودبام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأل كشف ضري والنذر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أهترز فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودي وخالفت بعد أوامري فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاء وألزمني حكمك وبلاء. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستغيلا مستغفرا منيبا مغرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمه وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدي وبعد ما انتبى عليه قلبي من معرفته ولهج به لساني من ذكره واعتقده ضميري من حبه، وبعد الصدق واعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيته. هيات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطق بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترف بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العين بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح ست إلى أوطان تعبدك تائئة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بي ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنه. يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، ألا أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثو يسير بقاء قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف ذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته. فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فأبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على أضابه فكيف أصبر على فراغه وأبني صبرت على هر ناره فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامته أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفو فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وضاغت أذابها بمعصيته وأبس بين أتباعها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمته ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيده ويتوسل إليك بربوبيته يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في الأعضاء وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمه أم كيف تؤلمه الله وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرا وأنت تعلم ضعفه أم كيف يتغلغل بين أتباعها وأنت تعلم صدقها أم كيف تزجر زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في إتقه منها وتترك فيها هيهات هيهات ما ذلك الذل بي ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أغتأ لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحدي وقضيت به من إخلاد معاندي لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماء أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأن تجل ثناء قلت مبتدئا وتتولت بالعنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستعون. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Like the time that we always together, we do the dua Commemorating Saba. At this point, I remind everyone to remember those who used to be with us, used to sit with us, especially in Saba, and your loved ones, and inshallah, all would benefit from this dua, especially those who sponsors the program. Inshallah, everyone would benefit. And التماس الدعاء نسألكم الدعاء. إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وقلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تاب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل أملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أذرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثبات الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائه والشاهد لما خفي عنه وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسدت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه مؤولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قف على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأذنب منك ذنوب المخلصين وأخافك مخافة المؤمنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد ومن كادني فكد واجعل لي من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة مني وأخصم زلفة لدي فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك وعتف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما إن شاء الله. ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأغلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا رب نصبت وجهي وإليك يا رب مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي ولا تغتى من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرزاق يا سريع الرزاق يا سريع الرضا. اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته قناة. ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاهه البكاء يا سابق النعم يا دافع النغم يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم. صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد تماس الدعاء نسألكم الدعاء.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسيق الذين اتقوا ربهم إلى الجنة زمرا حتى إذا جاءوها وفتحت أبوابها وقال لهم خزنتها سلام عليكم طبتم فادخلوها خالدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسيق الذين اتقوا ربهم إلى الجنة زمرا حتى إذا جاءوها وفتحت أبوابها وقال لهم خزنتها سلام. وقال لهم خزنتها سلام عليكم طبتم فادخلوها خالدين وقالوا الحمد الحمد لله الحمد لله الذي صدقنا وعده وأورثنا الأرض نتبوأ من الجنة حيث نشاء فنعم أجر العاملين فنعم أجر العاملين. وترى الملائكة حافين من حول العرش يسبحون بحمد ربهم وقضي بينهم بالحق يسبحون بحمد ربهم وقضي بينهم بالحق وقيل الحمد لله رب العالمين. وقيل الحمد لله رب العالمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله أعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا وإن الله لمع المحسنين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the arrival of the month of Muharram, and once again a opportunity, a blessing really from Allah for us to commemorate, understand, attempt to emulate the sacrifice of Imam Hussein. And in doing so, of course, pave our path towards our salvation. These days of Muharram are days of our identity, days of our pride. We pride ourselves in being that nation. The Prophet, of course, guaranteed his daughter Sayyidah Fatima that there will be a nation that will mourn for your son Hussein. We are that nation, and we are proud to be that nation. I want to thank, of course, the Saba community and Moulana Syed Abdi for this opportunity. It would have been so ideal for me to be there in the Bay Area with all of you, with some old faces and some new ones, and commemorating such beautiful days with all of you, a community that I hold very near and dear to my heart. This Muharram, of course, is a very unique one, and wherever I've been speaking today, I want to make sure that I mention the same message across the board. And I will give a little preview of what our topic will look like in the next 10 nights. But tonight, I want to make sure that all of us, including myself, we have the proper mindset going in. This is a Muharram unlike any other. In a Corona COVID era, this Muharram that's become online for a lot of us is very, very difficult. And there have been a number of discussions and a number of different things that have been said. Came across, my messages and my phone calls about the anxiety, about what will happen to Azadari. And so I want to address that quickly in the first half of tonight's opening lecture, and then preview a little bit of what the Ashra will look like moving forward. I am not naive. I understand that the environment, the fada, the mahal, going in the center, and commemorating Imam Hussein inside the masjid itself is ideal, and that's how it should be. And I want to take this moment to also say that this is not an ideal way to commemorate Imam Hussein. It is a communal commemoration. We have for many, many years, as long as I can remember, when a Muharram comes about, to do this as a community. And the fact that we don't have that communal dimension this year is difficult for a lot of us. It's a sacrifice. But it doesn't mean that Azadari as an institution, as a system now is going to be affected. Now is the time for us to, as I've been saying all day long in the various communities, to take these azakhanas and these banners and these black sheets on our center's walls and bring them into our home. We sometimes hear in Masaib that, take your hearts to Karbala, take your hearts to Bin Haramain. Now I think this Muharram we should bring Karbala into our hearts and Bin Haramain into our hearts. Now is the time for us to still maintain and uphold the adab and the etiquettes of Muharram. I remember growing up, of course, getting ready in my black clothes and climbing in the car with my family and driving to the majlis and, sitting there and listening to, a speech and crying and doing matam and drinking chai and drinking tea and coming home. Now today, of course, in this COVID-19 Muharram, all of that won't be there. It doesn't mean that we can't uphold those etiquettes inside of our home. So as I've been saying all day long, that if you wear black, pre-pandemic for every majlis, and wear black today as well, albeit in the comfort of your home. If you sit on the ground during the majlis, then sit on the ground during today's majlis as well. A lot of you are watching me from the comfort of your homes and your devices, on your TVs. And it doesn't mean that we need to now throw all of the etiquette of Muharram out the window. Maybe, of course, having a small majlis at home, the 4 of you, the 5 of you, with your small kids now, albeit for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, putting on a Muharram, a themed program on YouTube or wherever you want to do, with Kissa Kids, possibly, whatever the case may be. It's important that we now convert our homes into Husayniyas. In the process, now build together a single strong unit to now elevate towards Allah through the gham and the grief of Imam Hussein. This azadari isn't going to go anywhere. It has upheld and it has withheld and it has now gone through so much in history. So many attempts have been made to destroy this institution. So many infiltrations of weak ahadith, of individuals who are insincere, of enemies that want to destroy this institution, and it gets stronger and stronger every year. No pandemic will affect this azadari. It's now up to us now to become custodians of this azadari, protectors of this azadari, preservers of this azadari. And for this year alone, hopefully, we adjust. And we become individuals who now bring the azadari into our homes. Okay, so it's this anxiety, this depression, and this stress about what's going to happen to azadari, what's happening, blah, blah, blah. All these things need to kind of be removed from our head and our hearts. Yes, we are in a very unique situation, but we have to make the best of it. And the best of it is, like I said, to now make your home the masjid. If that means you put up alams and you put up banners and you put up flags, if that means that you get your children to do some artwork for Imam Hussein and put that up on the walls, and so be it. If that means that you lay down white sheets, you lay down white sheets, or you get everybody ready and you're on the ground watching the majlis, then so be it. That's how it's going to be. But this azadari is too strong for any pandemic or any virus to be able to take anything away from it. Okay? So the first point I want to make is just that, is the idea that we have to understand that this is a new system of azadari and one that we have to, of course, adjust to. The second point I want to make very quickly is that if you do plan to have any sort of gatherings inside of your home for any majalis, an annual majlis that you have inside of your home, I'm not against it, but it is important that you uphold the various restrictions inside of the home. Okay, if that means that you invite less people, if that means that there has to be a mask worn, if that means that there's sanitizers, if that means that there's very limited tabarruk given, then so be it. But in order for us to understand what we're supposed to do in this pandemic era, part of it is to use the wisdom that we have inside of our brains and not to be overly emotional to the point where our aql and our intellect is veiled. It's not going to happen. It's not the way that we approach the commemoration of that man that left the comforts of Medina to uphold the principles of the intellect and reason inside the deen. I'm not against anyone having their respective home majalis, but I would implore you that Islam now talks about the law of the land being important, talks about haqqun nas being important, the right of somebody. If you're going to invite somebody inside of your home, they have every right to leave your home healthy, the same way they entered. And you, as the host of the majlis, as the host of that event inside your home, have to take the necessary precautions. Okay. If removing garbage off the street so someone else can enjoy the street enjoy the walk on the sidewalk, or removing, let's say for example, a barrier on a sidewalk in case somebody might get hurt, same idea. Wearing a mask is also an act of charity as well, in the sense that by me wearing a mask, I'm ensuring that your health is upheld. At least I'm doing my part, and you have a right. Allah has a right over us, and people have a right over us as well. We can't trample on people's rights to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can't say that, look, the more people that enter my house, the more sawab I might get or more reward I get. So let's, in a home that might fit 20 people, let's invite 40 where it's sitting on top of each other, right? No mask, no social distancing, nothing happening, no sanitizing, no wiping down. And God forbid somebody gets sick from that majlis. That's not the intellectual wisdom and wise way to approach this majlis and this azadari. Have your respective azadari, but have the necessary precautions. That's point number 2. Point number 3 is I wanted to introduce our topic for the Ashra. I don't know what's being floated around in the flyers. I have yet to see a flyer from Saba, but in my discussions with some of the organizers, I wanted to speak a little bit about Islamic morality, being a better human being. We live in a world right now, with all that's going on right now with the racist movement and with, elections happening in your country, in the US, the economy now, of course, our centers now closed. Sometimes this creates a little bit of evil inside the human being. Sometimes this invokes those limited abilities inside of us. And those limitations can turn into satanic principles very, very quickly. And so it's important that we kind of remind ourselves of some of the basic and some of the more in-depth Islamic ethical moral principles that the deen has to offer. We've lost our sense of humanity. We've resorted now to elitism, and I'll talk about that in a couple of nights. But if we can summarize the entire mission of the Holy Prophet and other prophets, it was to inject the human race with what? With humanity. Allah says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. Surah Jumu'ah says that He sent down the Prophet amongst the Meccans to relate the verses to them, purify them, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and then teach them. But first purify them. Make them a human being. Make it such that, they can absorb the ilm and absorb the knowledge, elevate towards Allah without the ego, without the narcissism, without the arrogance. Purify them, then teach them. Because sometimes if that ilm occurs and you end up being knowledgeable in the deen without the proper purification, that knowledge can go to your head, and and all of a sudden now you believe yourself to be better than others on that very knowledge that should have made you humble to begin with. But because the purification process wasn't there, the knowledge now, of course, took a life on its own and actually became a reason for you to look down on others. Islam came, the Prophet of Allah was revealed to what? To perfect the conduct and the behavior of mankind. But the reality is that we live in a very individualistic world. And we have now kind of resorted to that, and that's trickled into our churches, our synagogues, and our masajid. We've kind of embraced this idea of to each his own, mind your own business, don't worry about it. If someone else is drowning, thank God you know how to swim and move on. If there's another individual now who's suffering in your community, Do we have that culture now to be able to now go and approach them and say, look, I know things are not right now with you. Anything I can do. If I know that in this family right now there's a nasty divorce that just happened, do I have the culture to sit there and say, you know what? I don't want to know all the details. It's none of my business. But is there anything that my wife and I can do or our family can do? We are here for you. Just leave the door slightly open. Is that culture there inside of our communities? Or are we building towards this idea that we have individual single clusters that make up a community? Because one thing that I really hope this pandemic brought about in all of us is that we really took the centers in our community for granted. Maybe I know I did. I didn't realize how important the four walls of my center were until I've been void of them for the past 4 or 5 months now. And so this reignited love that we have for the community, this anticipation for when our doors can open for everyone to come in. Yes, certain centers are opening across North America, but with very limited capacity. And now you realize the importance of the brotherhood, importance of the sisterhood, importance of community. That when the Quran says, kuntum khayra ummatan ukhrajat linnas, that you are the greatest nation amongst the people. What makes you so great? Ta'maruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhuna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billahi. Surah Al Imran says that what makes you the greatest nation, kuntum khayra ummatan, you are the best nation. It's not your personal salat or your journey to Mecca or you giving the khums. What makes you the greatest of all is that you look out for each other. That when you see somebody going towards good, you encourage them. But when you see somebody steering off the path, you grab them and say, look, where are you going? Why are you deviating? That's what makes you, the Quran says, the greatest nation, that you are there for each other. But sometimes we believe that, look, everyone's faith is their business. If someone takes off their hijab, it's none of my business. This azadari are those days where everyone comes out of their homes, everyone logs in, everyone's watching from their device. What can I gain from this sacrifice of Imam Hussein? The sacrifice of Imam Hussein so you and I can have a deen is the primary reason why this azadari is so important. We commemorate, we cry, we grieve, we beat our chest for Imam Hussein's sacrifice. The question I'm going to ask myself, and maybe all of you, is his sacrifice is well documented in history. What is my sacrifice today? We can't have it both ways. There has to be a conscious decision now to live a certain amount of life, a certain style of life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, in the Quran, calls the believers, Istajibu lillahi wa li rasuli idha da'akum lima yuhyikum. O you who believe, answer the call of Allah and the Rasul and the Prophet when they invite you towards that which will bring you life. Which will bring you life. The fact that Allah has to invite us to say labbaik to His version of life, Allah is life. The Quran is life. What is Allah inviting us towards? Allah knows that there are so many different manufacturers. Look, I'll give you an example. You walk into a bazaar, a flea market. Okay, there's all these stalls and they're all claiming to what? To sell life. Come and live on our path. Come and live on our path. Come and live on our path. And God is saying that I also have a stall. And this is what my life looks like. A life of a pious individual. A life where it's God conscious and God centric. Istajibu lillahi wa li rasuli idha da'akum lima yuhyikum. Meaning what? Buy Allah's life product. Have a conscious decision to live the life of God in this world. We can't have it both ways. Maybe those days before might have been there. A pinch of Thursday night, a pinch of Dua Nudba, a little bit of a misgathering, a little bit of music here and there. Maybe uphold your iman and faith in this kind of balanced, for example, world. But now, it's too blatant now. Kufr and disbelief is too blatant now. Shaitan is openly announcing himself to be Shaitan in the form of media, in the form of today's television shows, in the form of social media, in the form of this need for us to have sasti shu'rat, cheap fame. All of this now, You can't have it both ways. We have to be able to understand, and this, I really want to set the ground tonight for the next 9 or 10 nights that I'm with all of you, looking at the idea of becoming a human being. I'm not here to convert anybody into this worshiper or that worshiper. Let's start with humanity, because the deen is humanity, humanity is deen. Any deen that doesn't promote humanity is not a deen at all. Islam is a religion on humanity. When I say become a better human, I mean become a better servant of God. When I say become a better servant of God, I mean become a better human. In this day and age of hate, of prejudice, of racism, individuals being judged by the color of their skin, by their gender, by their height, by their religion, by their income, the human has lost itself. And this rise and fall and decline of the human being that is such a popular discussion nowadays is an accurate one. And I want to address that across 10 nights. Islam is a religion that came to save mankind from the brink of the hellfire. And not to be individuals whose faith and iman is so it's just so vulnerable. It's so weak. The slightest little bit of a problem, it becomes gone. Surah Hajj talks about this very, very beautiful. It says, there are those people, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. There are those amongst the men who worship Allah عَلَى حَرْفٍ, on the edge of a cliff, on the edge of a cliff. Or some translations of harf means on the edge of a boundary, meaning 1 foot in and 1 foot out, ready to leave now. On the edge of a cliff is a person who's very, very vulnerable. A little bit of a nudge, a little bit of a gust of the wind, and that person goes down the cliff. And the verse goes on to say that when everything is good, وَإِنْ أَصَابَهُ خَيْرٌ اطْمَأَنَّ بِهِ. When everything is khair in their life, mutma'in. They are itminan in their faith. Allah, you give me everything I want, I'll give you everything you want. You let me marry this person, you let us have a child at this time, you let me go to Hajj next year, you cure my mother of cancer, mutma'in in terms of my worship. You have my subhana rabbil ala wa bihamdih. No problem. But the verse goes on to say, وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُمْ فِتْنَةٌ انْقَلَبَ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ. Allahu Akbar. This verse is powerful, man. Surah Hajj, verse number 73. There are those individuals who worship Allah on the edge of a cliff. The Quran says when good is sent to them, they are calm on the edge of a cliff. But the moment that a fitna or a test comes in, then they turn their face away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, I have some young kids at home, right? So if they ever ask me for something that I can't give them, like Nutella for dinner, I want a Nutella sandwich, or can I have, chips, let's say, for breakfast? And I say no, they just turn their face away from me and they keep walking. Like, they're just so disgusted by me. Like, how could you say no to this? It's a perfectly normal question. I want all dressed chips, and I want salt and vinegar and barbecue chips and nachos, Doritos for breakfast. What's the big deal? I say, no, it's not good for your stomach. And they'll roll their eyes and they'll just walk away. This verse now says that Allah now what? Gives them a test and they turn their face away from Allah. One more test, Allah. One more diagnosis. One more broken engagement. One more failed pregnancy, and I'm done with the deen. I can't do it anymore. Forget it. These are people who worship Allah where? Ala harf, on the edge of a cliff. On the edge of a cliff, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, about to jump. I'm done. I can't do it. Give me good news. If one more person gives me bad news, I'm done. We have to learn how to worship Allah and become a true servant of God in the middle of the arena, not at the boundaries of the arena, not ala harf. These are trying times for us, difficult times for us. How many youth have reached out to me from all over North America? I'm watching these protests up and down, the BLM protests up and down the US. I'm watching now this move out to Europe and move out to the Middle East. I'm watching now what's happening with the coronavirus and how, it's a mess in the US right now. and lives are being taken for no apparent reason. Hajj was canceled for those who are not locals. This and that. Right now, Iraq is closed for the Zawad for the first days of Muharram. All this, and they ask, where is your God? Where is Allah? Why can't Allah fix this? We have to understand certain realities, and we're going to go slow now across 10 nights. But there is a dire, dire need for a sense of humanity, to remind ourselves that we belong to a social fabric, to remind ourselves that collectivism is far more preferred over individualism, to remind ourselves that my humanity, my actions affects everybody else. This absurd discussion that if I take off my hijab and plaster my newfound look on social media, it shouldn't affect anybody else. Absolutely affects everybody else. What are you talking about? How do you think that your one action? Do you think you are an individual, standalone creation in this universe? No, everything is very, very carefully now intertwined together. Everything is meshed together. There's a reliance and independence and interdependence on everything in this universe, from the sun to the moon to the ground to the grass to the rain to you and I. We'll talk about that a little bit, in the upcoming nights. But we've lost this idea of humanity. The Holy Prophet has a very beautiful hadith describing this. He says, I want you to imagine that you are on a boat with a bunch of people and you are right now in the deepest part of the ocean. And the individual, and there's one individual that has an axe in his hand. He's in the corner of the boat, and he's slowly but surely now what? He's axing a hole inside the back of the boat. You're in the middle of the deepest part of the ocean. Now you have two choices, right? You can look at him and say, oh, okay, look what he's doing. Wow, that's interesting. Oh, okay. Yeah, good luck, buddy. Or you could say, what are you doing? Can you stop, please? If that hole gets big enough, the water will get in and we'll drown. We'll sink. The Prophet says the boat is Islam, the people in the boat are Muslims, and the action of that one individual affects everybody. And yes, a lot of you might say, oh, that's too much to handle. I don't want to be the ambassador of religion. I don't want to think twice about the fact that if I post something on social media, oh my God, how's that going to affect this person or that person? But maybe we shouldn't take that as difficulty or take that as some curse, but embrace it as a blessing. That's one more protective layer between me and shaitan. We have to revive our Islamic morality. Look at each other not as competition, but as a building, as a bridge. And so we will explore things like the various powers inside the human nafs. We'll talk about anger. We'll talk about desire. We'll talk about fighting our anger. We'll talk about injustice. We'll talk about what it means to be a human being. We'll talk about one nation in the Quran. It's incredible how at one moment now, at one nation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and very briefly I want to touch upon this, inshallah, and then we'll move towards Masai. We'll keep it brief tonight. As the opening night of, the second night now where you are in California. Today was your first day. Where I am right now in Toronto, tomorrow is our first day. The Quran in Surah Baqarah, verse number 213, talks about ummatan wahida. It's not my topic, but very briefly, I just want to touch on this, inshallah, and then just so you understand where I'm trying to achieve. You know that my ashras, I've been to Saba before many times. I've actually delivered Muharram ashras there. All of you know that I have one topic that I like to exhaust across 10 days, and we go slow, just like a flight, right? We back off from the gate, we catch the runway, we taxi, we take off, we find an elevation, and then we begin to descend into our destination. At the end of these 10 nights that I'm with all of you, inshallah, or 11, 12 nights, however long it is that I'm speaking, I want us to understand the power of the insan inside of us. I'll talk about one nation in a moment. The actualization of our potential inside of us. when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala announces to the angels, Inni ja'alun fil ardi khalifa, I'm going to create this khalifa on earth. They were confused. This earth is a place of corruption. It's a place of bloodshed. Why would you do that? How are you going to achieve this proper khilafat with a human being if you are this unlimited perfect being and this human being has this animalistic dimension to it that is going to kill each other, corrupt each other, rob each other, disrespect each other, strip them of their rights? And so they said, sometimes we think that, and I mentioned this before, sometimes we think that they were confronting God or challenging God. The angels aren't programmed to challenge God. The angels were legitimately confused, and it is a legitimate confusion. That if you feel like the CEO of your company is leaving, let's say, on a leave for a year, and you feel like the guy he chose to replace him while he's gone is some junior level, entry level guy, you're like, wait a second, this kid doesn't know how to run the company. Are you sure you want to do this? I mean, you're the CEO. You've been running this company for 40 years. This guy has no idea what he's doing. That's confusion. I'm not challenging the decision. I'm actually confused. Can you help me with this confusion? Because Allama Tabatabai says the angels, their confusion was absolutely legitimate. They were describing one dimension of the human being. Allah had another dimension in his mind. And that's why he says, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. I know what you don't know. I know about another creation, another side of this creation that you don't know. That's this individual. And yes, while I agree that there is a potential for corruption, a potential for bloodshed, a potential to be a selfish, arrogant being. There's also a potential for them to be almost divine in nature, to be a representative, to be pious, to be selfless, to be God-centric. This is the different dimensions inside the human being, and we'll explore all the dimensions in the upcoming nights and how to handle each one. Islam doesn't deny these natural instincts inside of us. Islam doesn't say that anger is always a bad thing. No, and I'll talk about anger. There's an entire speech dedicated on anger alone. But what was Allah trying to tell the angels? That, look, I understand, but at the same time, there is this immense potential for them to be my Khalifa, my vicegerent, represent me. And if we think for a moment that this vicegerency is only for one Adam, this Khilafat is only for one Adam, you're wrong. We're wrong. All of humanity now has to be the Khulafa of Allah, has to be the vicegerent of Allah, the representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that when we meet each other, we're reminded of God. That has to be there. If that's not there, then we're not doing the job that Allah now initially created us to do. Now, one element that's lost in this whole conversation between the angels and Allah is the idea of free will. While Allah has created this angelic dimension inside of us, where we can be the likes of the ma'sumin, in terms of, our closest to Allah, to a certain degree. Of course, I'm not saying to become the 50th ma'sum, but I'm saying that we can now move away from certain sins and follow their path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's also another dimension that we're seeing today of war and racism and judgment, innocent lives being killed, people being denied, let's say, for example, the right to, clean water, homelessness, famine, diseases, all these things are there, caused by the human being, of course. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a summary was trying to tell the angels that, look, I know this side exists. It's the human being now that has to actualize the potential of being my Khalifa. And that's what we're doing, guys, on this in this world, is we are spending our entire lifestyle, our entire lifetime, trying to actualize the potential of being a great human being. Because all the tools are there inside of us. It's a matter of which one we're going to choose. The ajib And the unique nature of the human being is this, that usually in a war you have two separate opposing forces. One opposes exactly what the other one stands for. This one opposes what that one stands for. Each army has their respective commander. That commander now preps each army to go to war with the other one, correct? Inside the human being, there are also two opposing forces. One is animalistic, one is angelic, and they're vying for land inside of us, our heart essentially. The difference is that while the other wars have different commanders, we are one commander for both armies. For both armies. We command the angelic army, we command the animalistic army. Now, which one is going to be victorious? The one that we strengthen, right? The one that we give the most to. But first, let's understand both armies. Let's understand the demon inside of us and the angel inside of us. Some of us have just assumed that, oh, this is how I'm going to be. My akhlaq will never change, and this is just how I am, and absolutely not. There are ways for us to better ourselves, improve ourselves. Part of the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls marriage one of his signs in Surah Rum, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. The reason why he does it is because a spouse should be for another spouse that springboard, that catalyst for change. If you have a beautiful spouse beside you, that spouse should help you grow towards Allah. And sometimes growing is a very difficult process. But you have to be given all the tools to grow. It's not easy. Sometimes when you have a plant at home, it's a small plant. You bring it home from the store, it's a small plant. It's trying to grow now, but the pot is too small. So what do? You repot it. You take it out of the small pot, you put it in a bigger pot. Then you add more soil to it to fill out the pot. You're giving it all the tools now to grow. The plant has to adjust itself. It's used to that pot. It's used to this amount of soil. Now this is a new pot, lots of soil around. I have to now somehow, as the plant now, make the new soil mesh and mend and harmonize with the old soil. I have to become accustomed to this new pot. And once I'm able to understand the reality around me, then I can grow as a plant. But it requires some understanding first. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to ourselves. So remember, what we're doing in our life now, we're just trying to actualize that potential Allah saw inside of us. In the process now, there are moments where we kind of take one step back and two steps forward. There are moments where we fall off the cliff. There are moments where we edge off the cliff. That's why in the Quran, you are on the brink of the hellfire. Talks about the Arabs of the Jahil era. On the brink of the hellfire, on the edge of the cliff, by me sending my Habib and my Prophet, I pulled you away from that cliff. You were in the clutches of Fir'aun. I sent Musa to you. How many times have the Bani Israel now been saved from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's why up and down Surah Baqarah, several verses. Don't forget, remember the favors I gave you, O Bani Israel. Remember the blessings I gave you, O Bani Israel. Remember the fact that I saved you from the clutches of Fir'aun. Remember this, remember that, remember this. All of this now to do what? To actualize the potential inside of us, to be the proper Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Such that when we stand there in front of Allah on the Day of Judgment, we have strengthened the army of the angel and weaken the army of the animal. But there's a battle, and you guys know there's a battle. There's a constant battle. My youth out there, oh my God, you guys are battling on an hourly basis, forget on a daily basis. And the battle is tougher. It's tougher this generation than any other. I used to think that I had it bad growing up in Toronto, but right now, what all of you are facing on the front lines is very difficult. But one thing that I'm going to hammer home this Ashra is that you can't have it both ways. We're going to have to make a conscious decision to live God's life. Part of God's life is to be distinct individuals. I always say this. Those days are gone where you enter a room with people wearing white t-shirts. Okay? You enter a room with a person wearing white t-shirts. Everyone there in the room is wearing a white t-shirt, and you also wear a white t-shirt. Just mend into the crowd. No idea where you start and where you end. No idea. One blob of white. Those days are gone. If we want to say labbaik to Allah and buy the product of life that God's selling, it's a conscious decision to be God-centric. That requires sacrifice. We're in this month of sacrifice, commemorating the ultimate sacrifice of Imam Hussein. What is our sacrifice to Imam Hussein? Is my beauty my sacrifice by me lessening my makeup and loosening my clothes and now putting on my hijab? Is my music my sacrifice? I can't study without music, drive without music, cook without music. Is that my sacrifice? Is my anger and my tongue my sacrifice? That I have to now bite my tongue and think twice, not just lash out on my wife or my children? What is our sacrifice? In order for us to understand that, maybe the sacrifice is to weaken the animal inside of me and strengthen the angel inside of me. That requires you to be distinct, a little bit separate from everybody else. So in my example of white t-shirts, you walk into a white t-shirt wearing a fluorescent pink t-shirt. Wearing a fluorescent pink t-shirt. You will stand out. Everyone will stare at you. You will not blend in. You won't. You will be distinct. And the word I'm going to use is distinct, because that's the way that Imam Ali describes the pious ones in Nahj al-Balagha. Hum ahlul fada'il. They're distinct from everybody else. If the world is going towards one way, the pious ones, if they deem that way to be destructive, will go against that way, albeit by themselves. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. That ability is inside of us. It's a matter of us understanding the powers inside of us. So we're going to explore these powers inside of us. We're going to look at exactly how anger should be understood, how desire should be understood. What is the intellect, for example? How can I fight the fact? What is anger management inside of Islam? What is emotional intelligence inside of Islam? All these things have to be discussed, and they will, with the hopes now that in a world that lacks humanity, we become the ambassadors of humanity. If not to the whole community, ourselves, our family is enough. Let's start there. Because our families are falling apart. Our youth now are off the path. Divorce rates are up. Abuse is up inside of our marriages. All these things are going to be addressed in their right time. And all this is part and parcel of becoming a better human being. To be a Muslim is to be a human. You're not allowed to be inhumane to anything. Let me leave you with one hadith, inshallah, and then into Masadul, we'll move towards Masad. Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, give three different groups of people two different things. Look at the humanity and the inclusive nature of everyone involved. He says, to your brother, give him or her wealth and your blood. The two things that are near and dear to you. Sacrifice for your brother. To your enemy, give fairness and justice. Be just with your enemy. Don't allow the enmity of a person to infiltrate the animal inside of you. Because this person brings out the worst in me, I let them bring out the worst in me. Oh, we have a very nice discussion about taking the high road and forgiveness. Inshallah, all that is coming, guys. I just want to make myself a human being and take you along in that journey. Because God knows I need to make myself a human being more than anybody else does. And the third group, he says, is that to everybody else, give them kindness and compassion. Look at the 6 beautiful qualities that Amir al-Mu'mineen is describing to 3 different groups. The ones that you adore, the ones that are your enemies, and everybody else. Nowhere in those 6 qualities are anything negative, vicious, inhumane. Islam doesn't give you ijazat. The Holy Prophet is preparing his soldiers for war, saying when you go to the enemy's land, go there for a certain purpose. Don't burn their crops, don't chop down their trees, don't kill their animals. You're there for a certain purpose, fulfill that purpose and come back. Amir al-Mu'mineen was just struck with the sword, Qatil, the killer of the Amir al-Mu'mineen, standing in front of him, shaking. What have I done? The wound is fresh, the blood is fresh, the pain is fresh, the emotion must be so high inside Amir al-Mu'mineen. He looks at his Qatil, and the first thing he says to his son is to go get him a glass of milk. That's humanity. That's humanity. And it's being lost. It's being lost in our deen, in terms of our followers. It's being lost in our society as well. And I want to revive it this Muharram. I want to make the insan again. And let's start with inside. Forget everybody else. We have all the solutions for everybody else, guys. All the solutions for everybody else. We don't have any solutions for ourselves. I can sit there and tell this guy, you need this and this and this as your remedy. I can tell my spouse and my children, oh my God, you should do this and do that and do this and do that. I don't have the remedy for myself. I don't even attempt to begin the remedy for myself. Either I think I'm perfect or I don't want to face it. Whatever the case may be. But this humanity is an inside-out process, not an outside-in process. Yes, others may support you. That's why it's important to surround yourself with the right people. Choosing a good spouse, having a good friends around you, being involved in the community, all those things are huge to ensure that the animalistic dimension inside of you is weakened and the angelic continues to grow and build. Because when you look at this idea, and the Saba Center has a custom that on the first, after the first day of Muharram, they remember the kids and the children of Janab Muslim ibn Aqil. And what better segue and what a better masa'ib to recite tonight than these two amazing boys, Muhammad and Ibrahim. And I'll work backwards in my masa'ib. At the end, just when they're about to get killed by Harith, they ask Harith for what? For muhlat and for and a moment to recite 2 rakat salat to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're 11 and 10, some say. 12 and 13, some books say. They're under 15 years old. How do you get that angelic side inside of you that young, to be able now to ask what? For a little bit of opportunity to thank Allah one last time before you separate our head from our body. These are the heroes that we are here this Muharram to remember and commemorate. Don't just cry for them. Don't just beat your chest for them. Let's learn from them. Let's emulate them. Let's imitate them. Let's make them a source of our pride and salvation and emulation. This is why this system is so important. This is why so many individuals are given such a sacrifice to uphold the sanctity of this institution. When it comes to the 2 sons of Janab Muslim ibn Aqil, there are different riwayat that talk about their presence in Karbala. The one that I have read with the sanad, I will present to you in tonight's masa'ib. Everything else, I'm not sure about. They were mawjood on the day of Ashura with Imam Hussein in Karbala. They were there. History tells us that after Asr Ashur, when Imam Hussein was killed, the enemies approached the tents and began to light one tent on fire. The reporters would report that we would see a bunch of women and children run from the one burning tent and go into the other tent. They would come and burn the second tent. They would go from second tent to third tent. They would burn all the tents and all the women outside. Women and children. There's chaos right now in the plains of Karbala. Women everywhere, children everywhere. Bibi Zainab is trying to calm everybody down. And these 2 boys now, the books tell us, had ran so far from the Maidan of Karbala, they kept running to a place called Musayyib on the banks of Furat. I ask all of you who frequently visit Karbala, inshallah, once it opens, may Allah grant all of us the opportunity to go see Islam, Saba Abdullah Hussein. Make it a point, if you can, to go a little bit up the banks of Furat to a place called Musayyib. There's 2 small graves there of the sons of Muslim ibn Aqil, send your salams and do your ziyarah to them. Because the way these two died in complete ghurabat and loneliness is heart-wrenching. They had ran so far from the Maidan of Karbala that Bibi Zainab thought that they were killed. The enemies thought that they were killed. How many reports do we have of small children now laying face down on the plains of Karbala, having the horses being trampled on their back? The enemy assumed they were dead. Bibi Zainab assumed that they were gone. And the Qafla moved on to Kufa and Sham. Meanwhile, these two now went all the way up to Musayyib. They fell tired. They fell asleep. They wake up now, they see nobody is around. Zainab isn't there, Hussein is not there, orphan, two boys, all they have is each other. They continue to embrace each other. But now, of course, they're courageous young boys, brave young boys. They see a city way off in the distance. They make their way into a city, looking for water, looking for food, looking for any sort of help. And just like their father in the streets of Kufa now, they're alone in the streets of Musayyab looking for something. They rest at the home of somebody. This woman opens the door and sees these two boys that obviously look like they've been through a lot. She asked them, "Who are you? Where are you from?" They were shaking with fear, and they would say to her that if we tell you where we're from, will you kill us? She said, "No, I won't kill you." She said, "We're from Medina. We're the sons of Muslim ibn Aqil." She heard that. She's a Bani Hashim follower. She brought them inside. She gave them a meal. She gave them a place to stay. Some reports say her damad, her son-in-law. Some reports say her husband was a man named Harith. Harith now understood there's a bounty on these two kids' heads, and one would say that he could hear them worshiping Allah in the corner in their room. One report says that they heard them wake up in the middle of the night with a dream of their father saying, "You'll come to me very, very soon." Nonetheless, he realizes that these two are in his home. He grabs them by the collar and takes them to the banks of Farat. At that moment, that fateful moment, when they see the Shamshir and the sword of Harith, both Muhammad and Ibrahim ask, "Can we have a moment to recite 2 rakat salat to thank our Creator?" Amazing 10-year, 11-year-old. At that moment, to understand and to think of Allah is incredible. They recite the 2 rakat salats. At that moment, Harith now separates the head from the bodies and dumps the body inside Farat. Farat now is taking the bodies of the kids of Muslim ibn Aqil up towards Karbala, where they are buried. We send our salams now to the kids and the children of Muslim ibn Aqil. We send our condolences to the Imam of our time. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept this qaleel ibadat, inshallah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to weaken the hands of the enemies of humanity, to strengthen the oppressed all of the world. And finally, Allah, we ask you to give us that tawfiq to stand beside the Imam when he comes, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Everyone, Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Your voice says, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa alone. Roaming the windy streets of Kufa alone. Roams the only man of Kufa alone. In the dark cold streets of Kufa, his eyes full of grief restless like the wind, with eyes that rain only affliction. He cries out, Hussein, don't come to Kufa. These Kufians have no trace of shame. He cries out, Hussein, don't come to Kufa. These Kufians have no trace of shame. All those people who said we're with you, all their words were just an illusion, and their letters were only to deceive you. These Kufians have no future, they await you with rocks and weapons. They have filed the ranks of the enemy. Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Everyone, Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa, Hussein. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa, Hussein. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa alone. The night of Kufa has now set in alone. A trace of fear has come over alone. Rome's the only man of a Kufa. Ya Hussein. Kneeling on the ground, weeping with despair, raising his head, bending on his head. He cries out, Moulana, how can I reach you to tell you to stay away from here? He cries out, Moulana, how can I reach you to tell you to stay away from here? All those swords that swore to defend you, now they have raised up to behead me. There is not even one true man in them. All those hands that swore to feed you, now they have picked up rocks against me. Oh, these Kufians have no trace of shame. Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to everyone. Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa alone. Only wind and moonlight with him alone. Not a single soul to help him alone. Through the dead alleys of a Kufa, limping from his wounds, the thirst weighing down, walking confused, weeping through the night. He cries out, Mawla, oh please stay away. These Kufians have lost all senses. He cries out, Mawla, oh please stay away. These Kufians have lost all senses. All those houses that promised shelter, all their doors have shut. They have left me hungry, roaming through the cold, lonely streets. All those promises of protection, now I see ahead, prison and chains. Oh my Mawla, please don't come to Kufa. Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. MashaAllah, don't come to Kufa. Everyone, Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Hussein, don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa. Don't come to Kufa.